Well, let's bring in the managing partner of Next Year, Dr. Nwokolo. Thank you so much for being on the news tonight.
Thank you for having me at this.
Great. Your report presents staggering figures. I mean, and this is between 2020 to 2024, as I understand it.
Yes.
But given the limitations and challenges of data gathering in Nigeria, particularly in troubled zones, one has to ask, how reliable are your numbers? Do they represent a true picture? Are they underrepresented or misrepresented? Can you tell us?
I think you're asking the right question here. First, I will say how hours are gathered, and then I will tell you what the situation is.
Great.
We use 80% secondary data and 20% primary data.
Okay.
Just because when we started this because of lack of data, and we asked ourselves, how do we fill in the gap and provide those right policies for government? And that's how we started this. So what we did was to create this secondary platform that enables us to report information reported by organizations like yours.
Okay.
Maybe
from the security agencies. Okay.
Maybe these days newspaper, what do you report? We track them using some app, and then we've built our own database and we report them. But over the years, we've been able to set up primary data collection in Plateau State and Kaduna. But when we look at the data we gathered over the years, especially in these two pilot states, they are higher than what we have when we track the same state using secondary data platforms. So what you've asked, are they underrepresented? The answer is yes.
Great. So the challenge is even bigger than we think it is. Than what we have
yes.
reported. Let's just talk about some of the highlights. For instance, you said the Northwest. In almost all security reports, we've seen the Northwest, being highlighted. But I wanted to find out firsthand why the Northwest is most affected region when it comes to banditry and kidnappings, you said. What makes it so vulnerable?
I think there are a couple of things. Some may be historical, some may be religious, some may be ethnic in nature. But most importantly is that we've seen banditry mutate from what it normally was, an economic, criminality driven by economic want, to criminality driven by more than economic want to other things, right?
Such as?
Ethnicity, religion.
Is there politics in all of that?
Politics and so on, including the illicit mining going on in the Northwest. Now, if you go to a place like Zamfara, a lot of Nigerians didn't know there's a difference between Fulani and Hausa. Because they were one people, spoke the same language. It's only between them that they knew that we're not from the same ethnic stock, right? We always describe them as Hausa, Fulani, double barrel, because we felt, because they spoke the same language.
They are one and the same.
But over the last 4 or 5 years, if you go to a place like Zamfara, you will know that this is Fulani and this is Hausa, because that division that come between set of people that were like brother, sister, lived together. And it tied around issues of banditry, and not only banditry the way we understood it, but because it had degenerated into ethnic, ideological driven issue, and all happened around banditry.
Great. You mentioned the illegal mining, and I wanted to talk about that because at some point we saw even the government identified that as a challenge and put a stop to mining, illegal mining as well. How did these numbers evolve in that period, in the period under review, 2020 to 2024? Did we see any increase or decrease? And in fact, talk to us generally. What has the trend been like? Are we progressing? Are there any gains in any instances?
So for instance, about 6, 7, 8 months ago, there was a time government clamped down up to a year.
Yes.
On any form of mining.
Exactly.
If you go to our database, our tracking, it came down.
So there was a decline?
There was a decline.
Okay.
But the issue remains that because that these forms of conflict and insecurity are not do not drive themselves in silos. They mutilate, and that's why you saw our report. You know, it ties to a lot of things. You can't say this is purely banditry. You can't say this is purely illegal mining because they're all tied to each other. So for most times, these bandits work with other non-state armed groups who may not just be bandits, but other forms of maybe an armed group, right? Yeah. And all drive towards one idea or one ideology, which is either to get hold of a particular community and continue to steal from there. Is it equally important to understand that from some other feelers and some of the research we've been doing, they're not the ones doing it alone. There are other people within the society who are contributing to this whole thing, especially when it comes to issue of mining or illegal mining.
When you say other people in the society, what do you mean? Who are those people?
So if you go to those communities and ask questions and ask them who are the ones either funding, right, the mining in those places, you understand that in some of these communities, some of them should be artisanal miners, right? Yeah. Who have been given license to do this kind of mining. By the government, yeah. But you now find out that people from other countries other than Nigeria operating artisanal mining where they should be operating a commercial mining. Meaning, license were not given to them, but they've gone into these communities, hide under the umbrella of artisanal miners in those communities, and begin to operate.
And I wonder if there's some sort of collusion, but that brings me to my next question. We're almost out of time. The role of the government and security agencies in tackling this issue of insecurity, what have you seen in the 4-year under review, 2020 to 2024? I know you talked about increased budgeting, kinetic and non-kinetic, but we've heard that so much. We've also increased our defense budget over the years. So what's happening?
There are a couple of things to understand here. First, defense budget has been something that even to date, no one will tell you this guy is a contractor, that he works for the Nigerian Defense, Ministry of Defense. It has always been shrouded in secrecy because of state secret, right? But if you go to other clients, you find out that if you're a Senate committee chairman on defense, you know whoever, because the record will be given to you. But how that is done here are still things we don't know. But when you look at what is happening, we believe that if there continue to be more transparency on how these arms are procured, it will help to start reducing those wastage that has affected the way most of these procurement are done in the country. Yeah,
and so before I let it go, the question really then is, how has government responded to insecurity, and perhaps what's the outlook for 2025?
So when you look at the outlook, what we've predicted is that if we spend the defense fund the way it should be spent, if we look at other variables, especially flow of arms from the neighboring countries into the country, if we start doing peace building more, there are a lot of conflict in this country that requires people sitting down and is solved. But we've decided to be kinetic about it instead of being non-kinetic about it by deploying peace building approach to start reducing them. There are issues non-kinetic approaches can never solve. They can never solve it because people have a lot of attachment to it. Things like land and so on. In most of those things, roundtable conference is the key to the solution.
A lot to discuss. I mean, looking at your report is very vast. Work well done. Thank you so much. And I hope that the authorities are listening and you are collaborating with them to ensure that we have a more peaceful society. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Managing partner of Next Year, Dr. Nwokolo, on the news tonight.